We have been living in a sea of inversion, and the realm of human spirituality has not been spared. Almost everything we know has first been turned in on itself before being presented as truth. So is it any wonder why the religions and spiritual traditions have produced conflict and confusion when it has come to the condition we collectively find ourselves in? If we approach the concept of the divine in the way that has been advertised to us through this inversion, then we can't possibly achieve clarity. So how has the divine been advertised? As separate, distant, and reachable by a select few. The divine has been externalized, basically. The great powers of the universe have been put into the hands of a god or a pantheon of gods. Only through worship and adherence to these forces can we be renewed. That's the basic idea. In monotheism, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, the divine is in the hands of one all-knowing deity. We are the children who therefore must prove ourselves to this deity. In polytheism, whether it's Hinduism, Shaivism, or any ancient mythology, the divine is spread out to a pantheon, but nevertheless, these gods are the archetypes of the divine, existing in a higher state. Even in the New Age circles, the divine is delegated to the ascended masters, or a light called source, or divine extraterrestrials. The story is the same throughout all these traditions and schools. A figure or a group of figures are elevated as, or meant to represent, the divine. These figures can be worshipped symbolically, as the Buddha typically is, or literally as God the Father, or, say, the Hindu Shiva. But the name of the game in all these traditions is externalize the divine. Let us go from externalizing the divine to internalizing the divine. Therefore, we can clear up this spiritual confusion that many of us have found ourselves in. We must break down these barriers. It's widely accepted that we are but puny humans in a cruel world full of cruel intentions. The divine must be reached up for in such a cruel world. While there are remnants within each tradition of a divine force that pervades all, these traditions equally maintain division, rendering those remnants null. For example, in the Christian Bible, Jesus informs, "Thy kingdom of heaven is within." And yet the rest of the Bible pledges homage to one Creator who must be worshipped, whose will must be done, lest we pay the price for our own disloyalty. And the Buddhist scriptures talk about the Buddha within. Sounds lovely. And yet, Buddha is worshipped sort of like a god. In Buddhist temples throughout the world, it's routine to bow down to statues of monks and of Buddha figures. But the worship element is still there. Externalizing the divine is well and alive. Another example, Hinduism. The fundamental teaching of Hinduism, also known as Vedanta, is that a human being's basic nature isn't confined to the body or the mind. Beyond both of these is the spark of God within the soul. And this is lovely, but such a religion also upholds a plethora of gods that are worshipped as external forces. So, you can't serve two masters. What's the deal? I'll stop at those examples. The point is, these traditions don't maintain that the divine exists purely in the heart, fully alive whether we know it or not, within our experiences. The Creator and creation are one in the same. The separation of the two creates much of the turmoil we've seen here. This is one of the greatest secrets. In the plethora of regurgitated perspectives, we become confused about what's true and untrue, battling within mental epitomes and concepts rather than tapping into an essence that is intangible and unnameable. When beings pray, they oftentimes look up. But when the divine is conceptualized as existing above, then we naturally are to feel inferior to this force. However, in this inferiority, we can allocate responsibility for our spiritual attainment and say, it is not us who initiates divine change. That is reserved for, I don't know, Zeus or Allah or Jesus or an ascended master or some other deity. Even if we proclaim that the universe is doing something to us, we're still not realizing that the universe is the U-N-I verse, the you and I verse, one verse. It is in you and it is you. But if the divine is within, this places full responsibility on every situation that arises. It means as within, so without. Every experience that is present within our many present moments, present, dictates a piece of ourselves to ourselves. We only ever perceive our innermost, and to ignore this in place of a force outside is to ignore the capacity to transmute oneself and ultimately ascend into expanded awareness. Reality is always a magic mirror. That's what this has always been. We can only ever witness ourselves. But the self has been taken out of most religions and traditions. Self has been deemed selfish or a waste. Connecting with the divine has been advertised as at odds with connection to the self. But there is no difference whatsoever. When we are searching for this thing we call God, are we searching for ourselves or are we searching for an idea of the divine? To connect with divinity is to strengthen the conscious ability to create. But in order to create, we must fuse together the depths of the sub and unconscious with the conscious mind, blending the above and below into the 0 point. This is simplicity I'm speaking of. It is simple to illuminate the self because you are in yourself. It is much more complex to put that illumination into the hands of the right versus wrong paradigms taught to us by monotheism and other religions. It is much more complex to place spiritual illumination in the hands of a deity or force that is simply accepted as true. I say, enough of the wild goose chases. We are not here to find God. We're here to be in ourselves. We don't need to become anything other than what we already are deep down. This is the blending of the right-hand path and the left-hand path. The right-hand path being the path of oneness, of blending into an interconnected field. The left-hand path being an exaltation of oneself. And the middle path, which is what I'm talking about, is where we are when we merge both. Therefore, we are exalted within the oneness of the all, not absorbed by a concept called God, but not absorbed by our own self-righteousness either. The magic, the creative force that animates you and all of your experiences, is a force that is essentially on autopilot, twisting, turning, and manifesting through the fabric of your energetic signature. Just like in a dream at night, you are presented with your own mind's orchestrations laid out in front of you, although it appears separate. In this waking dream, not much is different. When we don't know ourselves, we must go through automatically generated experiences produced by unawareness. Let me rephrase that. We aren't aware that we are creating when we are unaware of creating. But this doesn't mean creation stops and starts. Creation never ceases. It just changes. As we become more and more aware of our creative potential, we can realize states that rival what we've heard in the stories of gods and goddesses. However, we are in the veil of Maya, so throwing up fireballs or teleporting isn't exactly possible in this hyperphysical condition. That's not what I mean. The creative force we have called God, or the One, is a subtle force that can only be known as much as it is felt. Go into yourself, not into a concept. Free from belief, free from simple acceptance, free from mental epitomes. In this freedom, we find only ourselves and no concept to uphold the self. Whether or not you accept wisdom to be named Sophia or to be a giant water bottle named Wendy, it matters not. The divine does not need its name to be called correctly because its name is you, in you, and of you. The only condition is that the receiver of wisdom is existing in a space of open-heartedness and full intention of expansion, of doing away with the old and making way for the fresh. Go into yourself, not into a concept. What's happening is happening, and whether we name that happening, it is still happening. Our experiences don't need to tie us down to a concept. This now moment is alive. The only aliveness as far as I'm concerned. Who is to say you are being right or wrong? There's this idea of the life review spoken of in near-death experiences. The idea is, when one dies, one is taken to some deity to be reviewed. This being is replayed the moments of their life to see for themselves the imbalances that weren't experienced. However, this scenario of a life review is always a projection of the unresolved inner that manifests into some external being, creating a life review. But if we confront our own out-of-control manifestations and resolve them through observation and thus transmutation, then there is no possibility for an outer entity to force a review or analysis. This is the point I'm trying to make. When we don't realize that all is happening within, simply expressed without, then we give away our power to some illusion that acts as the regulator of all. But if you yourself regulate, then there's no need or even a want for a regulator. The duality of righteous versus damned, heavenly versus hellish, exists in some form in all traditions. Even in Buddhism, a religion that often claims to have no dualistic views, there are many visualizations of hells and heavens. In the New Age movement, this has been carried over to the dualistic framework of high vibration versus low vibration. You, however, exist at the center of all dualities. These dualities don't hold any reign over you objectively. It is the adherence to an inner dual state that strengthens these projections of right versus wrong, angelic versus demonic, etc. It is much easier to externalize the divine. Oh yes, because again, it takes away a sense of responsibility. If there is no magic in the here and now, in our own consciousness and perception, then we can't fully engage with possibility. We are understanding as living souls that we are not the prisoners of anything else other than our own duality. We are not chained to the material realm by anything other than our own unawareness. So, confront, resolve, release. confront, resolve, release? Can you look in the mirror and see the fullness of divinity, without labels, without concepts, and without delusion or grandiosity? Everything is designed to bring us back to the heart. But who designed it? You did. It has nothing to do with a God enforcing anything. Like we've stated, in an unaware state, we must go through automated experiences to lead us back to a state of awareness. Everything is designed to bring us back to the heart. One look at the electromagnetic field of the heart tells us that the heart is the seat of the soul. Home is where the heart is. The so-called higher self is not higher than you. It is within you. In various cosmologies, it is suggested that the center of the earth, as I've explained in many videos, houses a mystical paradise of the immortals. That immortal spark is you, and access to this paradise is granted first through the knowingness that the homeland never left you. You simply created a simulated experience away from the homeland to lead you back into its treasure. The heart is the Holy Grail, and as we drink from this chalice, the mysteries and revelations, free from the confines of time, are revealed and released. This is an energetic mystery and revelation, one that words can point to, but never can describe. You cannot serve two masters. It is impossible. It can feel convenient to externalize the divine in the moments that feel out of control, and to re-internalize it when all feels grand and well. Even in moments of suffering, it is most coherent to know that it is I myself who is experiencing my innermost, and it is I myself who propagates change, transformation, and transmutation. So, let's go from externalizing the divine to internalizing the divine.
The emergency is coming our way.